Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Forum Daily West. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Liberal leader Mark Carney stops campaigning to meet with all premiers and have a phone call with the U.S. president. Trump calling the conversation extremely productive. Plus, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says her highly criticized trip to Florida is productive as she makes efforts to educate Americans about the benefits of a tariff-free relationship. And more than 140 people dead after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hits Southeast Asia. Thanks so much for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump says he spoke with Prime Minister Mark Carney today in a phone call he calls extremely productive. Trump confirmed the call in a post to his Truth Social account, saying he and Carney can find common ground on politics, business, and all other factors. Carney says Canada and the U.S. will soon start comprehensive negotiations for a new economic and security relationship between them, adding those negotiations will start immediately after next month's federal election.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over. What exactly the U.S. does next is unclear, but what is clear is that we as Canadians have agency. We have power.
The Liberal leader, who had broken away from campaigning to speak with Trump and hold a virtual meeting with all the Canadian premiers and territory leaders, resumed his campaign in Montreal today. Meantime, the other party leaders continued to campaign today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is promising to address rising housing costs if elected by bringing in new rules for corporate landlords and help for nonprofit groups. Speaking in Toronto, Singh says an NDP government would stop financial supports such as low-interest federal loans and mortgage loan insurance for corporate landlords who gouge tenants. Meantime, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising to get tough on crime if his party forms government, as the Tories try to raise campaign issues beyond U.S. President Donald Trump's economic threats. Canada's tariff war with the U.S. continues to lead the national conversation. According to Dr. Barry Cooper, political science professor at the University of Calgary, our country's response may be the wrong one.
So far as the Americans are concerned, this is the trade part of it is a means to get Canadians or the government of Canada to deal with drugs. The Americans call it a war on drugs. It's only Canadians who talk about a trade war, and the Americans actually have a point. We've had reports over the past several months of exploding labs out particularly in the Lower Mainland in BC. There's a huge amount of money laundering that everybody knows about that goes through the Lower Mainland through casinos and so on. So they actually have a pretty good point. And the kind of Canadian nationalist response to this strikes me as being particularly stupid, because if you want to make it a trade war, we, particularly in Ontario and Quebec, are going to be the big losers.
Catch my full interview with political science professor Dr. Barry Cooper coming up right after the business news. Well, if you love golf, you're going to want to pay attention to this. Lethbridge will be the host club for the 2025 Alberta Men's Amateur Championship. Paradise Canyon has not only been ranked Southern Alberta's #1 course over 26 years and been one of the top 60 in Canada, but it's also where the competition will be held from June 25th through 27th. Jay McGard, head professional at Paradise Canyon Golf Club, gives details about the event.
We will see players arriving for the Alberta Golf Tour. This golf tour is ran by Leah Bathgate out of Calgary, and this tour travels around Alberta and British Columbia throughout the whole golf season. We're also very excited that we've been chosen for one of the 4 two-day major championships that the Alberta Golf Tour is hosting. It is a stroke play event where the other 3 majors are Stableford and a couple other events that they would do. So we're happy to host the stroke play event here at Paradise.
So you're looking at 120 golfers for the event. They'll be down Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that week. And competitors of that level, they'll usually come down for a practice round as well. So You could see them the weeks or months before a few times. So we'll follow that event up with the Alberta Golf Tour on June 28th, 29th, the Saturday, Sunday afterwards, and get to see another group of this province's skilled amateurs, possibly some of the same ones.
And in November, I was awarded the International Promoter of the Year.
Meanwhile, the White House continues to report the tariffs as being the best thing possible for the United States. As we've reported here on Bridge City News, our parent company, Miracle Channel and MCA Media Group, has partnered with Dr. Phil's Merit TV in the U.S. Well, Merit TV's White House correspondent Lindsay Keith asked President Trump's press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, about the impact of the tariffs on the American people. Levitt's response is that Trump has dubbed April 2nd, when tariffs go into effect, as, quote, Liberation Day. Take a look.
Here in our new media seat today, we have Lindsay Keith. She is the managing editor for Merit TV and serves as their White House correspondent. Merit TV launched 1 year ago and creates and distributes content across diverse platforms. We're glad to have you with us, Lindsay. Please kick us off.
Consumer confidence hit a 4-year low this month. Can you help explain to the American people how tariffs will help them in the long run?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm grateful for the question. The American public will hear later this afternoon from the president directly on the topic of tariffs. And as you all know, April 2nd day, President Trump has proudly dubbed it Liberation Day for our country. What he means by that is it will be a day where the United States of America will no longer be ripped off by nations around this world. It will be a day where Americans finally see free and fair trade practices restored. We are no longer going to allow our allies, our competitors, and our adversaries to take advantage of American workers. And if you think about your hometown and the state that you grew up, Main Street looks a lot different today than it did many years ago. And President Trump wants to restore America as a manufacturing superpower around the globe. He wants products to be made right here in our great country with great, hardworking American hands that will ultimately result in higher wages and more money in the pockets of the American people.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she had a, quote, great time yesterday at a fundraiser for a right-wing U.S. organization in Florida. Smith says on social media that she had a meaningful fireside chat with conservative commentator Ben Shapiro about the Canada-U.S. trade war and the benefits of having a tariff-free relationship. She says she also spoke with the chief executive of the event organizer PragerU in an effort to educate Americans about how integral Alberta products are to their day-to-day lives. The Alberta Premier also spoke on the latest Alberta Update episode to touch on the federal consumer carbon pricing ending on April 1st. She mentioned she is watching trends in gas pricing and keeping in touch with gas and retail companies to make sure the expected 17-cent decrease occurs on a schedule.
What I'd like to see on April 1st is that if the carbon tax indeed does come off, everybody should see a 17-cent decline in the amount that they're paying at the pump. Now, I've asked my Service Alberta Minister, Dale Nally, he's responsible for consumer protection. What we want to make sure is that the retail gas companies are passing that savings through. So I've put a little bit of a warning out there. I've noticed those prices creep up. Some of that is legitimate. Sometimes what happens is that retailers try to keep prices as low as possible because it's very competitive. But because of wholesale markets, if the wholesale price goes up, it means our prices go up. And indeed, prices have recovered a little bit. So having it go up a little bit is justifiable. But I would expect on April 1st, we should see a dramatic decrease in that price. And I'll be asking Minister Nally to make sure it happens.
Kathleen Ganley, the NDP MLA for Calgary Mountain View, was in Lethbridge and stopped by our studio Thursday to chat with Naveen Day. She weighed in on Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's recent meeting with Mark Carney and the list of 9 demands that Smith made. Ganley also voiced her concerns with the future of the Grassy Mountain coal mining project.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith recently had a meeting in Edmonton where she made a list of demands that must be addressed within 6 months of the new Prime Minister being installed to avoid a, quote, national unity crisis. Can you tell me a little bit more about this and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, I think that our premier here in Alberta should be acting in the interest of Albertans. And so what Albertans are concerned about is their cost of living, their jobs, our economy here, their health care. And instead what we have is a premier who spends her time threatening people, threatening national unity crisis. Albertans are Canadians too. And I would say my biggest concern with Smith's position is that, you know, she's threatening and playing politics when she should be standing up for Albertans.
Wow. And then the fate of the Grassy Mountain coal mining project, let's talk about that, because that's now in the hands of the Alberta Energy Regulator. So how do you feel the outcome will be, and do you feel it will be a positive outcome?
Well, I definitely don't want to presuppose what the AER is going to do, but what I will say is this project is a huge concern.
Well, Alberta Health Minister Adriana LaGrange was in Airdrie Friday to announce $17 million from Budget 2025 in planning funds for new urgent care facilities in the province. The province says if the budget is passed, the investments would redirect up to 200,000 lower acuity emergency department annual visits, freeing up capacity for life-threatening cases.
This includes $15 million to support plans for urgent care centres in West Edmonton, South Edmonton, Westview, which would be Stony Plain, Spruce Grove, East Calgary, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Cold Lake, and Fort McMurray. And of course, the $2 million that we're talking about today to advance plans for the integrated primary and urgent care facility proposed by One Health Airdrie. The locations for these new urgent care facilities were selected based on current and projected increases in demand for lower acuity care at emergency departments, as well as metrics related to current and future access to care.
Voting time is approaching. The federal NDP candidate for Lethbridge, Nathan Svoboda, stopped by the BCN office and spoke about what he has to offer the Lethbridge community if elected to represent the city in Ottawa. Heidi Echevarria reports.
This candidacy doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's willing to stand and fight for the future that they envision.
There are 5 candidates running for the Lethbridge Member of Parliament. The parties nominated their candidates for the seat in the federal election, which will be held on April the 28th. Among them is the federal NDP candidate for Lethbridge, Nathan Svoboda, who says what makes him unique among his opponents.
I've always been a boots on the ground kind of person. I've always wanted to work hands-on in the community, advocating for the community, and this is just the natural progression of that advocacy. Ultimately, I want to bring that passion, I want to bring that deep rootedness in our community to Ottawa to advocate for us. You hear so often of how people in the West here feel like we're unheard. So you want someone that's not just going to talk, who's going to fight and fight for you. Our community doesn't need to just settle for conservative cuts. It doesn't need to settle for inauthentic token gestures from the Liberal government. We can break the cycle. And New Democrats, we don't just talk, we fight. And we've been fighting for you, and we will continue to fight for you no matter the position we're in. Across Canada, and especially Lethbridge, is feeling it when it comes to threats from the Trump administration down south. Right? And the cost of everything already going up. We're working more and more and feeling less and less secure. And the NDP recognized that. So along with those retaliatory tariffs, we want to do things like remove the wait time for EI, or increase EI, or have work share programs where if your hours are reduced, that EI can help pick up those lost wages. And again, that's what contrasts the NDP from the other parties, is we have always been worker and family focused. I'm a paramedic. I work with Recovery Alberta and Addictions and Mental Health, primarily with our unhoused and addictions population. And I've really gained a heart and a passion for that community. I've worked with Streets Alive and the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen. I've ran community youth programs in Lethbridge. And this has just been a very natural progression of that advocacy to be able to support my community and the things that we care about. The future isn't something we wait for. It's something we're going to have to fight for. And again, this candidacy, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's willing to stand and fight for the future that we envision.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Well, in other news, according to Lethbridge Police, in 2024, the vast majority of calls for their service did not require use of force. In a release presenting data shown to the Lethbridge Police Commission, LPS said that through nearly 32,000 call responses, 99.4% were resolved without any use of force. 248 subjects were involved in the 0.6% of cases that did require force. There were no fatalities or hospitalizations, and only 53 subjects sustained minor injuries, with just over half requiring any treatment. In 80% of the cases where there was force required, subjects were perceived as agitated, intoxicated, or suffering through mental health or a state of crisis. 17% had access to weapons and 3% were perceived to be in normal mental state. 21 officers were injured in 2024 and nearly double from 12 injuries in 2023. Additionally, no firearms were discharged in 2024. Only non-lethal methods were used. Chief of Police Shaheen Medizadeh says the officers' ability to communicate and de-escalate situations is what prevents harm and saves lives. Since 2020, LPS says that over 99% of calls for service have been resolved without force each year since. That is your Forum Daily West report. I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks so much for watching.